What is up, guys? It is time to talk some Thursday night football. Going to be breaking down tonight's game between the Saints and the Jaguars from both a DraftKings and a FanDuel perspective. Going over some top lineups, contrarian plays, best captain, MVP options, everything that you need to make some money for tonight. So if you could do me a favor, like, follow, subscribe. This content is free, and your support by just clicking that button, which takes 30 seconds for the like, 30 seconds for the follow, does really help to keep our content free. And then also, if you want to sign up for the football package we have at Stokastic.com, link included below, and that includes all of the tools and data that we have over at Stokastic. And one thing to note here as we start to break down the game is that Trevor Lawrence is officially listed as questionable at the time that I'm recording this. He says he's going to play, but we'll end up seeing what happens with his actual status. Reports are indicating that he is going to be a game time decision. I do think he's more likely to play than not. And in this run of lineups and in our projections, we currently have Trevor Lawrence in. So just keep that in mind, that Lawrence right now projected in. If you're watching this later in the day and he ends up getting ruled out, then yeah, obviously a lot would change. But I feel fairly decently confident that we're going to see Trevor Lawrence out on the field tonight. If we go ahead and look at these DK lineups, the number one overall highest projected lineup by the simulated ROI here, it is Derek Carr in the captain spot with Alvin Kamara, Calvin Ridley, Jimmy Graham, Michael Thomas, and Trevor Lawrence. So we do have a game here that's geared pretty heavily towards the passing attacks. Even Alvin Kamara, despite being a running back, he's been heavily involved in the passing game for the Saints this year. So this is a game, or I should say game script here, where really geared towards the passing attacks for both teams. If we sort by the most duped lineups, these are the lineups that are expected to be duped the heaviest over on DK, and rarely ever see this when I'm building out DK lineups, that one of the lineups that's expected to be duped pretty heavily actually is still in my top 150 set of lineups. This one here with Christian Kirk, Alvin Kamara, Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, the Jaguars defense, and Trevor Lawrence. But the lineup that is expected to be duped the most based on this run of lineups here, it is Evan Ingram in the captain spot with Calvin Ridley, Chris Olave, the Jaguars defense, Travis Etienne, and Trevor Lawrence. Let's go ahead and look at some of the exposures, and we'll try to find out who we're getting the most exposure to, who we're underweight to, and then some of the top captain options as well. Then we'll go build out the FanDuel lineups. But looking at our number one most rostered player right now, it is Trevor Lawrence. Now, one thing that I think could happen over the course of the day is Lawrence's ownership, I think, could end up going up just based on positive reports on his health. People might be a little bit hesitant to play him as of this morning because of the questionable status on the injury report. But if that gets cleared up later in the day, which I expect it will be, I wouldn't be surprised to see Lawrence go up a little bit in terms of projected ownership. Right now, he's projected for 43.8% ownership in the flex spot. Let's see, 8% ownership in the captain spot. So overall, we have Lawrence projected for about 52% exposure right now. I wouldn't be surprised if that's closer to 60% as we near lock, as more updates come out on his health status. Other players that we're getting to a lot of at the top here, Alvin Kamara, Derek Carr, Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram. So a lot of the players that were popping up in some of those top projected lineups for us, not surprising, they are the players that we overall have the most exposure to in this set of lineups. As far as the captain options, we're getting to the most of Derek Carr, 20% of him in the captain spot, followed by Kamara here at 18%, Michael Thomas at 14%, Christian Kirk 13%, and then ETN Lawrence. So fairly spread out at the captain spot. 20% of Carr is a pretty decent amount, but nothing really crazy in terms of ownership to individual players in the captain spot. This is one where it looks like a little bit flatter ownership. And also, some of these slates, if you guys have watched other videos that I've done, it's not all that infrequent that we'll see quarterbacks show up in like 80 to 90% of our top 150 lineups. That is not the case today, where we have Lawrence in 60% of lineups and then Carr is in 70%. So not quite as heavy on the QBs overall in this game as we've been on some other recent games. Let's look for some contrarian options. Anybody really low owned that we're getting a decent amount of exposure to? Not like crazy low owned, but we've got Brandon McManus, kicker for the Jaguars, project for 18.7% ownership, getting to him at 25.3% of lineup. So McManus, if you're looking for a cheap option, he's somebody who's showing up in a good amount of lineups with fairly low ownership. And then who else? Shaheed, although with that said, about even with the field on him, but still another cheap option that makes sense to save some salary with in lineups. See if there's any really low owned options. Yeah, Jimmy Graham. Punt play and Jimmy Graham only projected for 5% ownership, getting him in 14% of lineup. So those are a few ways that we could go and look to save salary. Jimmy Graham being the most contrarian of the bunch here to get to. If we're looking at players we're underweight to, coming in underweight to Christian Kirk, underweight to Calvin Ridley, underweight to Taysom Hill, underweight to Foster Moreau, underweight to Blake Group. But the players that we are most underweight to actually are Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. I am interested to see as we get closer to lock, like if Trevor Lawrence looks healthier, if he starts to project better, could that also mean that Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley will also project better? That is a possibility, but at least as of right now, we are underweight to the field on both Kirk and Ridley here. So that pretty much wraps up DK. Let's go ahead and check out FanDuel now. All right, FanDuel, build out the lineups here. And now let's check the big tournament over on FanDuel. We did see on Monday Night Football, the prize pool dipped a little bit for the big FanDuel tournament. Let's see what it's looking like today. Well, it would help if the app worked. Service unavailable. All right, so at the time that I am doing this video, FanDuel is down. Cool, right? That's sweet. So I'll just kind of make an assumption here and say that the big GPP on FanDuel just set it to like 20% to first, because that is more or less typically about where FanDuel ends up coming in. So after these lineups are done being run here, then we'll go into the contest generator and sim out the lineups. And yeah, just going to have to guess what the FanDuel tournament is, because usually I take this time to look up the FanDuel tournament, and it is not cooperating at the moment, the FanDuel app. All right, so we got these lineups built here. Next move, and oh, just realized, by the way, here's what an idiot I am. I had the wrong slate selected. So when you're building lineups in the contest generator, make sure you have the right slate. I had the main slate selected. I wanted to select the Jaguars-Saints slate. Well, here's an early look at what the lineups, or at least what exposures look like for the main slate on Sunday. But anyway, rerunning this. And by the way, I'm not going to cut that out. I'm a human. I make fuck ups, and we got to see it right there on screen. And part of that also is me not being the best with editing stuff. So I'm not going to take the time to edit it out. I'm going to leave it in so everybody can see what an idiot I am in the middle of the video by accidentally building lineups for the wrong slate there. But here we go. All right, now the showdown lineups are built for FanDuel. And yeah, like I said, FanDuel not up at the time that I'm recording. The site is down. The app is down for FanDuel. So I'm just going to blindly say 20% is the payout to first place in the big FanDuel tournament. And we'll work off that logic right here and see what ends up popping up. Typically on FanDuel, it is geared a little bit more towards quarterbacks. Let's see if that ends up being the case for this slate, though. Favors the top 150 and the highest projected lineup by SimROI. It is Derek Carr in the MVP spot with Jimmy Graham, Calvin Ridley, Chris Olave, and Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to assume that Jimmy Graham is super, super low owned over on FanDuel. It could be like a 2-3% owned play that differentiates some lineups. The most duped lineups on FanDuel, and this is what's going to happen when I set the payout to just 20%, is that dupes end up popping up more often in some of the top projected lineups. So this lineup, which is projected to be duped super heavily on FanDuel, is still one of my top 150 lineups. That's with Carr, Michael Thomas, Evan Ingram, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. Let's go ahead and look at the exposures now. And yeah, still not super, super crazy heavy on quarterbacks here. We've got Derek Carr, most roster player overall, showing up in 67% of our top 150 lineups. Then Trevor Lawrence here in 64% of these lineups. Skill position players that we're getting to. Michael Thomas, overweight to him. He is in nearly 40% of lineups, our most rostered skill position player here, followed by Evan Ingram at 33%. So those are the top pass catchers in my lineups that are being paired with Derek Carr and with Trevor Lawrence. Getting to a good amount of the Jaguars defense here on FanDuel, 32% actually of Jacksonville's defense. That's the most of a defense I can remember seeing show up in our Sims tool in a little bit of time here. Jaguars defense there. Other ones that we're getting overweight to, let's see if we could find some contrarian options. Where's Jimmy Graham? Yeah, 2% projected ownership for Jimmy Graham, getting to him in just under 10% of lives. So if you want to be really contrarian over on FanDuel, I think Jimmy Graham is a sensible way to go ahead and do that. As far as the MVP options, we're getting to Derek Carr the most, followed by Trevor Lawrence. They make up, let's see, about 60%. or actually exactly 60% of our top 150 lineups MVP exposures. Other players we're getting to in the MVP spot: Alvin Kamara at 12%, ETN at 9%, Christian Kirk at 7%. All those more or less even with the field, but we are overweight to the quarterbacks in the MVP spots being the prime options we're getting to. Carr only projected for 12% MVP exposure, getting to him in 34.7% of those lineups. And then Derek Carr actually projected, that was Carr. Where's Lawrence? Here's Lawrence. Lawrence only projected for 10% MVP exposure. We got to 25% of them. So the field primarily going to who so 16% the field is getting to Kamara, 12% ETN. And then I assume Ridley in here somewhere as well by the field. Let's see. Where is the field getting to Ridley in the MVP? Yeah, 6%. Who are we underweight to here on FanDuel? Derek Carr, not really, because we're overweight to him in the MVP spot. Underweight to Calvin Ridley. So underweight to Ridley on both FanDuel and DraftKings, which for me has really been a plan of attack whenever I've looked at the Jaguars offense this year. I have been more so on Calvin Ridley from the Jaguars this year I've been more on Christian Kirk than I've been on Calvin Ridley. And a lot of the reason for that is Ridley has typically been more popular this year. And then in addition to that, you just get a price discount on Christian Kirk. And Christian Kirk's been targeted more times this season than Calvin Ridley has. He is the number, if we are counting targets as the measure for who is the number one receiver, who's actually getting the ball thrown to them the most, the number one wide receiver for the Jaguars, it is Christian Kirk. It is not Calvin Ridley. So pretty consistently throughout the year, I've been higher on rostering Kirk than I have been on Ridley. Other players underweight to here: underweight to Kamara, underweight to Olave in the captain spot, and then underweight here to Taysom Hill. So underweight to Hill on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So don't vulture touchdowns and ruin my night, Taysom Hill. Just do your normal thing where you get 2 catches for 5 yards, carry the ball 3 times for 10 yards, no touchdowns. We'll be all cool. And that is going to wrap up everything here for both DraftKings and FanDuel. If you guys haven't done yet, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, follow. It's all very much appreciated. And if you want to sign up for our football package, check out that link below. It'll bring you to our sign-up page, and you can go sign up right there, get access to player projections, ownership projections, contest generator, Sims tool, everything you need to make some money at NFL DFS. Good luck tonight, guys. And if you want more information, check out Live Before Lock. Lofty and Neil Orfield are going to be breaking down the slate from 7:15 until lock, and that is Eastern time. So hope you guys show up then. Good luck. See you later.